You're listening to the Patriot Nation Podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriot Nation Podcast. As always, a proud member of the CLNS group of podcasts. Make sure you get on and subscribe and like all of those shows on YouTube and on your wherever you get your podcasts. But for us, it's Pat Lane and my guy Matt St. Jean. And Matt, the Patriots offense is screwed. Drake May is overrated. Probably a bust, for being honest. I mean, let's just be honest, right? And the season's over. It's just another 3-14, and we'll just give up, and it's fine.
That's if you, based on the headlines about Felker today, it seems like that's what they were saying.
Oh, they're going backwards. What have they done? Paperwaves saying hello. What's up, Paperwaves? Thanks for stopping in. Nelson, as always, in here as well. Appreciate you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. You know what? Listen. I made this point on Twitter. I'll make it here as well. This is what I want. This is what I want out of Drake May. I want him to throw interceptions in May and even a little bit in July. I don't mind. That's okay. I'm all right with that. You're learning a brand new offense. And what that also means, if you're throwing a lot of interceptions in May, is that you're probably throwing to young guys. Those are all good things. That's what I want to have happen this year, right? And so, now listen, I don't want to continue all training camp. I don't want to look terrible, but those things are going to happen. And I'm totally fine with that. And everyone should kind of feel that same way. I think the biggest part for me is that the receivers, if he's throwing to young receivers and they're making dumb rookie mistakes, that's exactly what we want. This is what we want because you can get those mistakes out of the way now, and then they'll be ready for the season.
For some context, by the way, for anyone who missed it, May started off the first OTA with media present, throwing 4 picks in his first 9 pass attempts. Didn't throw one after that. I wouldn't say I want him throwing these picks, right, but I would say that it doesn't move me in any direction. At this point in the offseason, defense is usually ahead of the offense. With the personnel they have, the Patriots defense should be better than the Patriots offense this year anyway. So that part shouldn't be a surprise. Some guys I think are rotating in and out and banged up. Yeah. So it's almost all the team, but it's not the entire team right now. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like he came out and had a stinker to start. It sounded like, two bad throws, 2 miscommunications is how I saw it described just about everywhere.
Yes, one of them, I guess Hunter Henry got tackled, and then Craig Woodson came up with an interception.
Yeah,
whether that was a miscommunication or not, again, we don't see it. We don't think that was, so who knows? But
yeah, and I know there was I think on that one it was a throw over the middle that got deflected up into the air, and Woodson picked it. So that was kind of in the genre of a number of picks that May threw last year, was throws over the middle that there's the one at the goal line and the one in Arizona with Kayshon Boutte that happened last year. Both of those were the Boutte one not as much, but both of those were throws where May is either trying to lead his receiver in a direction and maybe not putting it exactly where he wants it to be, which leads to got to make a tougher play on the ball. These players aren't as good as you'd like them to be, so that turns into a turnover.
Yeah.
Which is partially on May. But yeah, it's, to me, I saw that and I think it was a reminder of the fact that this team still has some distance to go. Drake, at this point last year, we should keep in mind the debate in Patriots Nation was, do we sit Drake May for all of the season or only most of it? That was kind of the consensus. He is already ahead of the development curve, but I do think the fact that he quickly and obviously was ahead of what a lot of people anticipated the curve to be has meant that people have jumped ahead a little bit on that. May is not a Pro Bowl quarterback yet. He's not an all-pro quarterback yet. He has the talent to be. he could be as early as this season if things all come together. It's May. It's a new offense when his teammates aren't very good right now. So there's going to be days like this. And you hope that, when you come out in training camp and the pads are on, these issues are mostly a thing of the past. Every quarterback's going to have bad days. Every quarterback's going to have bad throws. Every quarterback's going to make bad reads. It's just a matter of cutting down on that over time.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. And you mentioned that the defense is ahead of the offense. I think the defense is also significantly more talented than the offense. You don't have anyone even approaching the skill level of Christian Gonzalez on the offense, right? Not even approaching. I would say you probably don't have anyone at the skill level of Carlton Davis on the offense. And so, you're looking at it saying you're outmatched in both corner matchups, whoever is out there. And, maybe until you get Stephon Diggs back, but depending on how he looks coming off the injury. But, so you're already at a disadvantage because they're already better than you. And then you throw on top of it that it's May, it's a brand new offense. It's a bunch of rookies out there, a bunch of rookies in second round, and second year guys. Right. And so, it's a recipe for not a perfect outcome. And I think that that's totally fine. And again, and you're right. I mean, I'm being a little ridiculous when I say, I want him to throw interceptions because I don't, right? But at the end of the day, what the interceptions tell me is that he's giving the young guys a chance. And that's more than anything. That's what I want is I want the young guys to have a shot. Right. And that the interceptions thrown leads me to believe that those young guys are getting a lot of opportunities. And that's exactly what I want to have happen because, we talked about it already. We don't expect this to be a playoff team this year. It could be, they could be, and they could, all of a sudden they could win a few games they're not supposed to win. And now they're in the playoffs. But for me, this year is about getting as good as you possibly can to ramp up and really compete for the playoffs next year. And to do that, I want to get the most out of my young guys. I want to see who I have. Is Kayshon Boutte a legitimate receiver in the NFL? Let's take a look. Let's find out. Let's see. He played well last year, but let's see if he can be consistent and be a legitimate wide receiver in the NFL. Can Kyle Williams be a legitimate wide receiver in the NFL? Can Jalen Polk be can he be a contributor in any sense of the way, right? Same thing with Javon Baker. Can either of those guys be any sort of contributor in the NFL? I want to know that stuff going into the offseason next year. And so I want those guys to get as many reps as possible because I want to see. And then maybe Afton Chisholm is somehow as good. Maybe Lan Larson, who knows, right? So I just want the young guys to get as many reps as possible. Matt Collins is out there. Good for Matt Collins. I like Matt Collins. I think he's a good signing. I think he'll be good in the room. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't even need to be out there as far as I'm concerned. I want the young guys getting a ton of reps. And Matt Collins is going to be important, I think, later on in the season. But realistically, I want those young guys getting as many reps as possible.
Well, I think, struggles. The biggest issue for Drake May was kind of always the accuracy, the inconsistency that came from that.
Yeah.
And right now, he's trying to learn a whole new offense. So when that happens, you're thinking about making sure you're making the right decisions and understanding what's going on. So you might get a little sloppy with some of the mechanics at points.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that once you're on top of the offense and you know it well enough, the mechanics will ease back into where you want them to be. That's pretty typical of quarterbacks, to a degree. I think that was a Josh Allen thing as well. It's once he understood what that Bills offense was and if you're playing with confidence, that allows you to play faster. And then that also allows you to play more free and focus on more of the little things. So yeah, it's and it's also important to remember this is one day of OTAs. For all we know, these could be the only 4 interceptions May throws all off season. It could also have been his best day so far, and we would also have no way of knowing that.
Right.
It's a very limited sample size, and we also don't have a lot of detail on what exactly they were doing. The pads aren't on. This is, you're not looking really at results at this point in the process. You're looking at at least the coaches are evaluating the process of what's going on. The problem is we have no idea what that is right now.
Well, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is that we just don't. We just don't know, exactly what his progression looks like, exactly, how things are going. And we hope that they're going to improve, but we don't know. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. And he's going to have some ups and downs. He's going to have some bumps in the road. It is what it is. I think that's okay. And I'm willing to live with that because I do think that ultimately we're going to see, I think McDaniels is going to get the most out of him. I think McDaniels knows what he's doing, and he's going to get the most out of Drake May. And I think that that's huge. And if he can get near what his ceiling is, he's going to be incredible. And if we can get him there in the next few years, now you're looking at it saying, all right, we got the quarterback. Now we got to build the team around him. And I think they're doing a good job of starting to do that. And if they can continue to do that, you're talking about a Super Bowl contender in a few years, but we got to get May to that point. And then again, we have to work on developing these young guys as well. So, if we hit on Kyle Williams and Travion Henderson, and one of those other guys, right, whether it's Booty, Polk, or Baker, becomes like a legitimate threat at wide receiver, and we still have Stephon Diggs, you're talking about, and Pop Douglas continues to kind of do what he's doing, maybe a little bit better, but you're looking at like a really good offense combined with a really good defense, but you just don't know what that's going to be yet. And so I need to give as many reps to those guys as we can and work on building those guys up as much as we can. Because if those guys don't pan out, now we got to go get other guys that are going to work on the offense. So, we'll see where it goes.
The process right now is also about developing the veterans too and developing the chemistry, because you don't want to be in a situation where you get to joint practices in August and you realize, oh man, none of these young guys can play.
Right.
And now your quarterback doesn't have chemistry with the vets you brought in, and you're in a tough spot. So it's just a learning process for everyone. And I mean, literally at this point, it is learning. I'm sure there's some evaluating going on, but even the evaluating is going to be about how quickly people are picking things up, whether it be physical technique work or in the classroom, film work, picking up the playbook, all that stuff. I will say, one thing I'm kind of looking forward to is we talk about the Drake May of it all. I believe it was confirmed this week that the Patriots are going to have 2 sets of joint practices. With
one
Washington.
For sure on the road, right? Washington at home too.
Yeah, it sounds like Washington at home and then Minnesota on the road.
Weeks 1 and 2.
Yeah, weeks 1 and 2 of the preseason. The ones with Washington is going to be incredible because it's going to be Daniels and May going out there.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's going to be packed.
Yeah, that's going to be a blast. And then Minnesota, it'll be May against JJ McCarthy out there.
Yeah.
But more importantly in this, the Washington team that went to the NFC Championship game last year, and a Minnesota defense coached by Brian Flores. So, you're going to get really good opportunities here for Drake May to learn. And, last year that opportunity kind of got wasted because you could bring in Philly and your offensive line is not good enough for those to be competitive enough reps to develop the quarterback.
Yeah.
So, if your offensive line is better, and that Minnesota practice is going to be a real test of that with how Brian Flores likes to disguise things, the communication aspect of the offensive line, and specifically Drake May calling out protections is going to be a massive test there. But it'll also be a huge opportunity for him to grow and develop into the regular season. That's where discussion in the comments about how iron sharpens iron. That's it right there. You're going against quality teams in a setting that you can control. That's something you want to maximize just from a quarterback development perspective. Forget all the rest.
Absolutely. Nikhil points it out. I mean, get your popcorn ready because Gonzo against McLaurin and Justin Jefferson at joint practices, on the football field, not in the game. They're gonna set up one-on-one reps with those guys. It's gonna be awesome. Oh, it's gonna be awesome.
It's gonna be the bait tweets with one clip out of context from these joint practices are gonna be unbelievable.
Yeah, either way. Gonzo's a bum. We can't stick with, look at this. Gonzo shut down McLaurin on this one play. It's so it's gonna be great.
But it's going to be a really good opportunity for May. And, the work is starting now. You got a couple months here to figure things out before the season starts, and hopefully it all comes together. Because it's like you said, if it works out the way they're hoping with all these guys, the team can be competitive right away. You can make the playoffs this year. You're basically just banking on flipping a coin and landing on heads 6 times in a row. It happens. That absolutely does happen.
Yeah.
But that's what you're, with between free agent additions and like the draft class. That's kind of what
Well,
you need.
it's going to have to be Washington, what Washington did, right? Where you hit on a
Yeah.
bunch of the free agents, you hit on a bunch of the draft picks, and all of a sudden you're good. And it's not. I'm not gonna say it's not that far off, but like if Stephon Diggs can get back to the level that he was at before the injury, you're looking at it saying, okay, well, if Kyle Williams can be pretty good and Stephon Diggs is good, now you have 2 legitimate wide receivers of the slot guy. If you can build a better offensive line and when the defensive players hit that you signed, now you're like, okay, I feel pretty good about where we're at, right? And May's got to take that big step forward as well. And that I can see it. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if that were the case. I just don't. We've talked about it on here. I don't think it's gonna be the case. But at least there's a hope. Last year there was no hope that was gonna happen. This year there's some hope, which is cool. So that's awesome. Look at this, Paper Waves killing it, dude. His birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday, Paper Waves. And Ravens Pats in Baltimore. That's sick, dude. That's so cool. That's a stadium I've never been to. I'd like to go there, but I've never been there. Baltimore's a cool place. The National Aquarium is in Baltimore. That's a good take. That's a good take. It's right next to it's like a submarine or something like that right outside, which is kind of cool. And they have like this whole bird aviary at the top. It was a cool place.
I haven't been there. I will shout out for anyone here who is a whiskey drinker. There's a distillery in Baltimore, Sagamore. They make Sagamore rye. Very, very good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like rye personally. That's my drink of choice. So I'm a fan of what they got there. And if you go there, they usually have some kind of, something different, something fancy, something fun type of whiskey that you can try. I've done it a couple times when they had a Vinters finish. So they age the whiskey in wine barrels. And it gets this very smooth, full aftertaste on it. And then there was one that was aged in tequila barrels. And that one was it was basically, imagine a drink and the front end of the drink tastes like whiskey and the back end of the drink tastes like tequila. That's what that was.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily for me, but I have friends who really like tequila who love that.
Okay. All right. And if you're a Triple D guy, Diners, Drive-In and Dives, Guy Fieri, I went to Miss Shirley's, which is down in Baltimore. Actually, right there, down in Baltimore for some breakfast. They had some solid breakfast over there. So if that's something,
saying his name right, by the way.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Guy Fieri.
Guy Fieri. It's my guy, dude. Love that guy. I love that show. It's one of my favorite shows of all time.
And another show in Baltimore, you could stop by and see Omar. So you haven't seen The Wire, Pat, so you don't get that one.
No. I know who Omar is. I've never seen it. So
have a drink with McNulty.
But anyways. All right. Before we go ahead.
I had another takeaway from the OTA.
All right, let's hear it.
Yeah, this is something I was listening to Pat's chat, that guy Michael Hurley, and Doug was saying, just kind of commenting on which players were with when they split into starters and backups, which guys are with the starters, which guys are with the backups, things that caught his eye. So a couple names here that he mentioned. One of them, Layden Robinson with the backups. Sounds like Wes Schweitzer was ahead of him with that unit. Again, this is with one OTA. We don't know what they're doing with the other ones.
Yeah.
Javon Baker was down with the backups. And it sounded like Efton Chisholm got some reps with May at some point. So I don't know exactly how that was divided up. I don't know if that means Chisholm is, ahead of Javon Baker on the depth chart right now. But and then Jaheim Bell was getting reps with the backups. Jack Westover, who I think was an undrafted free agent last year, was on the practice squad, was with the starters as one of those guys. And then the last name that I thought was the most interesting, Anthony Jennings, was with the backups.
Doesn't necessarily surprise me about Jennings because, you're looking at Keon White, Harold Landry. Those are your two starting defensive ends. Anthony Jennings isn't playing over either of those guys,
Well, it kind of sounded like the group with the starters was almost like the top
was like the
rotation.
rotation. Yeah.
So it sounded like Anthony Jennings was not in the top 3 or 4 on the edge.
Yeah.
It sounded like Harold Landry, Bryn Swinson, Keon White were the primary guys getting reps, and then Jennings is with the backups.
Yeah, interesting. And again, it's OTAs, so we don't know. And Schweitzer is kind of the same way, right? Is Robinson going to be working, eventually with the starters, or who knows? I will say, I thought that Evan Lazar was talking about this on Catch 22 Pod, and he was just basically saying that like Wes Schweitzer is basically Michael Jordan. Like he's essentially what you had last year.
Michael Jordan the guard, not Michael Jordan the guard.
Correct, exactly. And so if you're starting him at left guard, things have gone awry for you. You should not be starting Wes Schweitzer at left guard. No offense, but like there's a guy that started 2 games in the last 2 years. That's not the guy you want to be starting at left guard. And Lane Robinson's got some holes to his game. City So's got some holes to his game. But like you feel like you should at least have one of those guys be able to take that job. But again, I don't know if that's not the case, then you're in trouble. Because Schweitzer's fine, but he's just not. I don't feel great about putting him, especially next to my rookie left tackle. It's really hard.
Well, I think the appeal of Schweitzer is that he's very experienced. Like he'll be 32 by week 2.
Yeah,
he was a starter for Washington in 2020. Starter in Atlanta too for a season at right guard. It kind of sounds like he's the super sub. He can play center as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounded like because it sounded like Will Campbell was entrenched at left tackle. Garrett Bradbury was entrenched at center, and they had Schweitzer playing both guard spots because when it was rotating out a little bit, and Morgan Moses was rotating out a little bit. So he's going to be your super sub, but like Schweitzer, if you just go by like what PFF has graded him as, he's been about the same level of player as like a Cole Strange for his career. Layden Robinson last year was graded out worse than any season Schweitzer has had in any capacity. So like you want your young players to play and earn spots, but like I liked the signing at the time as a high floor. If he has to play, he alone is not going to be the reason why your boat sinks.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that you're in a tough spot if none of those guys can beat him up. That's my personal opinion. And look, that doesn't mean he's going to be awful. Doesn't mean the offensive line is going to stink because of it. It's just like, and I'm not saying that they're going to be good. I just feel like you've completely blew that position if you're starting Wes Schweitzer because City So stinks. Michael Jordan. Layden Robinson stinks, right? Like those guys stink and they can't play. And so because you feel like even if they were the same at the same level, which is essentially a replacement level starter, if they can't get to that point, see you later. And that's the one problem for me. Listen, if he makes the team and he's a super sub, I got no problem with that. If he has to spot start here and there, like that's okay with me. It's just if you go into the season with him as your starting left guard, I don't know how anyone can feel good about that. Maybe he can be okay, but it's not like we're going to look at it and say you have a below average left guard. That's just what you have.
I do think that no matter how this pans out, they are probably likely to have a below average left guard. I think all the options they have on the table are, and I'm okay. Like I'm okay with the approach they took at that position this year because it's like Cole Strange has talent, and it sounds like he is the starter at left guard right now. Mm-hmm. So like if he realizes that talent, he can be a quality starter. But he has not done that yet through 3 seasons with some very bad luck in there.
Yeah.
Layden Robinson, he had a couple moments last year, but he was also unplayable at points.
Yeah.
City So had some moments his first year, and we haven't seen that since at
Correct.
all. And it was always very realistic that none of those three guys would pan out. So I think this makes the Schweitzer signing look good, because right off the bat it feels like if Robinson is going to be where he is on the depth chart, then like that probably tells you they might already think that's not going to work out, and it's time to move on and start looking for other options. And you can band-aid one guard position. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. I will also say the fact that he can play center too. Garrett Bradbury was the center. Jared Wilson, I believe, is not participating right now. I don't know the context around that. But if Schweitzer can play center and Jared Wilson outplays Garrett Bradbury, goodbye Garrett Bradbury. Like
Correct.
that's where that opens up for you here. So like I think he actually has a pretty decent chance to make the roster and play this year.
Yeah, and I don't, again, I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying I don't want him as my starting left guard day one.
Oh yeah,
right. I would have preferred for them to have gone out and signed a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who signed a 1-year, $3 million deal with the Browns. Right, like
yeah,
that's the type of stuff that I wish that they would have done. Is go out and get something like him, or in the 5th round, take a guard. There were 1 million guards still on the board. Take one of them, right, and see if you can develop one of those guys. And they didn't do that.
They did. It sounds like they almost took Savania, the Arizona guard, which is I think again very interesting about how they view the position. And they I don't think we talked about it on here, but I think the guys in Catch 22 were talking about how Forged and Foxborough caught that at 85 the Patriots were talking about taking an offensive lineman, and then at 95 they take Jared Wilson, the center. But the tenor of the discussion had changed a little bit, and like they had someone they knew they were taking at 85, and then there's a discussion at 95. So the fact that there's a discussion at 95 tells you it's probably not the same guy they would have taken at 85. And who went in that span? Wyatt Milam went in that.
Yeah.
Another tackle to guard convert. Someone who I really liked. Milam to me is a guy, like he measured with short arms, but when I watched his tape, I didn't necessarily see that show up the way I expected to. Like I thought it didn't seem like an issue for him. I liked him a lot as a prospect. I would have really been okay with him taking him at 85. And I think you put it all together, it seems clear that they recognize that left guard could very well just be the weak spot on the line this year. And Schweitzer's your high floor option, but if Moses can give you 2 years at right tackle, and Will Campbell is a starting caliber left tackle, that means you're going into next year needing to fill one spot on the line, and it's at guard. You can do that in an offseason. You can fix that in a draft. That's a pretty easy thing to bend, and you can fix that with scheme stuff. If you can get quality starter play from the other guys, you can plug in a C- left guard and be totally fine.
Yeah.
Especially if Will Campbell's as good as they're clearly hoping he'll be, then that'll make the left guard's job easier. And then I feel like we have to mention, we didn't happen at OTAs, but like if Will Campbell doesn't last at tackle and left guard is an issue, you just kick him inside. He can be your break glass in case of emergency option there. If he's not working out at tackle, and then the arms do prove to be a problem in the NFL.
Which is fair. Yeah, it's fair. So, yeah, we'll see. I don't love where they're at, but it is what it is. Charles Grant went 99 as well. Just another guy. And Charles Grant, I think, probably looks like an offensive tackle more than an offensive guard. But I just think when he makes that transition from William and Mary to the pros, I think he's probably going to end up as a guard. Maybe not, but I think that's where I had projected him. I kind of liked him as a guy. Carson Vincent's another guy who went late. I think the 5th round. Where is he? 141 to Baltimore. Like I'm a fan of that pick. You know what I mean? Now, the Patriots traded up for Joshua Farmer. I'd rather have Joshua Farmer than Carson Vincent, but the point stands that I wish they had done something more. It is what it is. It's not the end of the world. They have Jack Conley, so it'll be fine. And honestly, again, to your point, if left guard is the only position that you feel like we don't love it, I think that you can get by with it. I also think that if you feel better, you feel good enough about Garrett Bradbury at center, and you think that he can hold up for the year, that you might consider moving Jared Wilson to left guard at least for this year. Let him play,
Yeah,
let him get his
I
feet
would
under him,
also.
and then move him to center next year.
You've got
So,
some. Well, I think the fact that Onwenu and Moses should, if they're healthy, just be entrenched as your starters
yeah.
on the right side means that, like, all right, Schweitzer can be left guard or center. In theory, Strange can be left guard or center, and Jared Wilson, in theory, can be left guard or center. So that's three different guys that you have opportunities to get on the field. Whether we're talking about them as developmental options or we're talking about them as floor raisers or just band-aids for your offense. And I don't know. I think it's a better spot at that, just at those two specific positions than they were last year. It's a little bit tough to evaluate because we thought David Andrews was going to be good last year and healthy.
Right. Right.
I do think Schweitzer's better than Leverett was, which is important. Like, he's
Yep.
a better scheme fit and a better player.
Yeah.
So,
we'll see.
I will note on this, it did sound like there were a couple sacks and pressures in OTAs, which there's no pads. I don't really know what these stats matter. But the only thing that did catch my eye there was that it sounded like one of them was on a schemed up blitz. It was a Marcus Jones one. And that caught my attention just because the biggest weakness of this line the last couple of years has been their inability to react mentally and pick up blitzes. And I'm not going to, we're talking about one unpadded rep in an OTA. I'm not going to overreact, but it did, I was like, okay, that was an issue last year, and we're seeing it crop up again here.
Yeah.
I want to follow that this offseason.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's something to keep an eye on for sure. That and the games, they could not, for the life of them, just a twist, a simple D-end, D-tackle twist. They just couldn't block it. Drove me nuts last year. So those are two things to certainly keep an eye on. And Sean points out, by the way, Jack Conley as well. Another guy that theoretically could be a dark horse at left guard as well. Big dude, 6'7", so he's a little bit bigger than a normal guard necessarily, but he's going to have to play guard in the NFL, and we'll see.
Worked out for the Eagles with Mekhi Becton guard
Sure did
last year.
Sure did. So maybe it'll work out here.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned the line games. Layden Robinson's City, so that's where things fell apart for them, was their inability to grow in that. And I think Robinson had one better game near the end of the season. But was that because he was growing, or did he just accidentally have a good game?
Right. Well, and you wonder too, like, with actual coaching, will that get better?
Exactly.
How good has the offensive line coaching been the last 2 years? Has been pretty much non-existent. And so let's see what happens, this year moving forward, and see if we can improve that a little bit.
Yeah. I will also mention because I mentioned Wyatt Milam went between picks 85 and 95.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other offensive lineman who went in that gap, and that was Emory Jones. That was the right tackle across from Will Campbell at LSU, who was kind of seen as, this is something we talked about with the Will Campbell stuff too. Like, Emory Jones was seen as a potential first-round pick coming into this year. He's that kind of athlete. He's young. Just didn't really develop for him. You're hoping that happens here at the next level.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things with Will Campbell was like, okay, well, if Campbell and Emory Jones succeed here at the next level, you're going to be looking back saying, how did we not develop these guys properly at the college level the way we wanted to? And Emory Jones, if that's the guy they had their eyes on at 85, is also interesting because he's a right tackle, but he's athletic. And in theory, he is a guy who could have 4-spot versatility on the line. Like, if Will Campbell's not at left tackle, in theory, he could be over there. And he's also a guy who, if he doesn't, he's a good enough athlete and a good enough player that if he fails at tackle, you're going to try him at guard.
Right.
So, I thought that they'd be interested in somebody like that potentially is also interesting, especially with the age of Morgan Moses. Are they looking for their own developmental right tackle?
Right. Yeah. Good point. I'm happy that they got Jared Wilson instead. Took the 4th-round pick next year and moved back 10 spots and got Jared Wilson. But
yeah, no, I mean, that's not gonna.
I agree.
Guess that move at all. Yeah, just telling about how they've viewed it. It definitely seems like they feel like they needed to upgrade maybe every spot on this line, but
Yeah.
Mike Onwenu.
Right. So, all right, let's take a break. We got a few things to talk about when we come back, including the New York Knicks making history. We got to talk about it.
Yeah, we do. Have that.
But all right, this ad break, of course, is for Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000. That's right, 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Cash into the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup, whether it's points, rebounds, assists, or all three. Take your pick of more or less for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series. Now, I know we're in the conference finals now, but every lineup that you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Takes to Tickets sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. It's not going to be in Boston, but that's okay. They'll fly you out there. I mean, come on now. What's better than that? So that's what you can do. All right. Also, one of the things that I love is that they take Venmo, they take Apple Pay, they take MasterCard. They do a ton more. You can get your money quickly in and get your money quickly out as well. Every Tuesday, don't forget, they have Taco Tuesday, okay, where usually 15 to 25% discounts on a lot of different players. They also have Flex Friday. So if you're listening to this in podcast form, that's today. If you listen to it tonight, that's tomorrow. Okay, Flex Friday, you got to opt in on that, but your lineup is protected. You win the lineup, or you get promotional money back in the money that you lost. It's a win-win situation. All right, so what you're going to do, you're going to download the app Prize Picks. You're going to put in the promo code CLNS. When you do that, you play a $5 lineup, you get $50 instantly. Don't have to win the lineup, you just got to play it. So again, download the app Prize Picks, put in the promo code CLNS. When you play your first $5 lineup, you get $50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, there you go. All right, last night. Let's set the scene. Everyone. Let's set the scene. The New York Knicks up 14 points with 2.5 minutes left to go in the game. And in the history of the NBA, 994 times in the playoffs that has happened, and 994 times the team up 14 points with 2.5 minutes left to go in the game has won that game, but not last night. Not last night. For the first time in 995 tries, a team came back and won. Tyrese Halliburton, I don't care if he traveled. I don't care if he double dribbled. I don't care if he took 97 steps. It doesn't matter to me. Hit an insane fadeaway, made the Reggie Miller choke to the Garden, and then won in overtime when his foot was on the line instead of being 3. Just absolutely incredible. I shut the game off. I shut it off. I was like, I can't watch this freaking Knicks. Like, whatever, dude. And then I get a notification like Halliburton, and I'm like, what? What do you mean Halliburton?
Well, and you missed the barrage of threes that was Aaron Nesmith.
Yes.
Knocking them down. I have never seen, like, he went Steph Curry. It was crazy.
8 for 9. 8 for 9 from 3 last night,
like
which is
5
insane.
in a row.
It was wild. Wild.
Like in that last stretch. Yeah, unbelievable. That was one of those hate watches that was so good for my soul. Badly needed. Highly entertaining game. I knew we were going to get that Reggie Miller choke at some point in this series. There's no way we weren't going to with the stakes here and the emotions involved. The fact that we got it immediately in game 1 is crazy. Incredible content. And the fact that his foot was on the line was better because, going into overtime then, well, no matter what, now this is going down in infamy because it's either going to be, the time he did it as part of a comeback and they won, or the time he did it and then they lost the game.
That would have been awful.
Very, very funny.
Yeah.
That shot by Halliburton at the end of regulation. Like, that is unbelievable. And that was, watching it, it was, I loved that he dribbled back out to create space and get that shot that he wanted. And it's like, all right, that this is the game right here. Ball hits back rim and goes straight up. And when you see the ball come off with that kind of velocity, immediately your heart sinks as someone that's rooting against the Knicks here, because when a ball comes off with that much velocity, it's going anywhere but where it just came from. And then you see how high in the air it goes. And I was like, oh my God, this has a chance. Like, this is not over yet because it just went right up. And seeing that come back down, unbelievable. And then I think the other guy who deserves a shout out here is Obi Toppin. Pair of dunks in overtime that were
including
huge.
the game winner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not game
And it
winner, but
was
the one at the end.
sealer.
Yeah.
And this is like, neither team has an answer on defense in the series right now. So I think we're just going to get, fireworks and emotions and a really fun series. Hopefully the Pacers come out on top. But yeah, that was good for the soul to watch the Knicks lose like that.
Oh, so good. So good. And Neesmith, I saw a few takes online that, the Celtics, not necessarily that the Celtics were dumb to trade Neesmith, but the fact that Neesmith was dumped by the Celtics, right? And that's not necessarily the case. Celtics traded him for Brogdon, and Brogdon won Sixth Man of the Year. They just didn't have a place for him to develop. I think the Celtics thought very highly of Neesmith. I certainly thought, I think the fans thought very highly of Neesmith. He worked hard. He's a good player. They just didn't have a room for him to grow. He's behind Jalen and Jason. Like, what are you going to do? You can't play the guy because he's behind the two best players on the team. And so, and you weren't going to be able to give him time to develop,
And he needed the reps. Like, he needed to actually see the floor to develop.
Yes.
It was clear that he had the talent, and it just needed to come together.
And so I'm super happy for him. Still a good trade by the Celtics, because then you end up trading Brogdon to. Did Brogdon get traded to Portland, or did he get traded to Dallas?
I don't remember where not Dallas. I don't know where he ended up, but that was part of the moves they made the following offseason to get Porzingis and Holiday.
Right, because Porzingis was Dallas. Wasn't Porzingis from Dallas?
No, Porzingis is from Washington.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I played for the Wizards.
Yeah, so I don't remember where they traded him, but either way, you make that move, and you send. I know they sent Rob Williams out to Portland, but I can't remember who else they sent. Doesn't matter. The point is,
Brogdon went with Williams to Portland.
I mean, so you get Drew Holiday,
and then he got traded to the Wizards.
And then he got traded to the Wizards. So that's funny that he ended up in both places.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I think that was, a good trade by the Celtics. Obviously ended up working out for them, but also has worked out for Indiana too, because he's grown into a really good player. And so I'm happy for him. So
yeah.
Anyways, all right. So that was great. Other thing,
can I add another non-Patriots sports thing?
Do it. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I'm a Florida Panthers hater. Love to see them lose. Unfortunately, the Panthers keep playing teams that I also hate. So I was rooting for the Panthers against the Leafs. The Panthers are now playing the Hurricanes. Have you checked the score tonight, Pat?
They're playing tonight? Oh, God. Tell me it's worse than it was last night. Let's go, dude. Screw
5-0
Carolina. Let's go.
Now, Panthers. Yeah. So here's a fun fact about the Carolina Panthers. Once this game is over, they will have lost 10 consecutive games in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Insane.
They will have lost the first two to start this series. They got swept by the Bruins in 2019, and they got swept by, I think it was the Penguins in 2009.
Unreal.
10 straight Eastern. So this is the third time in the last, 16 years that they've made the Eastern Conference Finals. That's pretty good. They just can't win when they get there.
They just can't win at all. That's wild.
Yeah. They lost. Hold on. It might be worse than that. Oh, I'm sorry. It is worse than that. It won't be 10 in a row. It's going to be 14 in a row. Because they also made it in 2023 against Carolina.
Sake.
So, then 4 in 2023, 4 in 2019, 4 in 2009.
Unbelievable.
Never seen that happen to a team before. And I just don't like the Carolina Hurricanes, man.
Yeah.
I've had I got into hockey kind of around 2009 when the Bruins started getting good, and I remember when the Hurricanes went to the conference finals. It's because they beat the Bruins in the series before. Game 7 overtime at TD Garden, Scott Walker gets the win for Carolina, who, as like a 11-year-old, he sucker punched one of the Bruins players in Game 6, I think it was. Maybe it would have been Game 5. And I was like, well, he has to be suspended for that. And then he wasn't. And then he scored the series-clinching goal. And I was like, there is no justice in this world.
Yeah.
One of a long line of Game 7, like when the Bruins have had Game 7s at TD Garden, if it's against the Maple Leafs, they win. If it's in 2011, they win. Any other circumstance,
They always lose.
It's unbelievable.
Yep. Oh, it's not good. Not good. So, all right. One more thing we wanted to just chat about quickly was this Eric DaCosta interview. It was from a few weeks ago now. Eric DaCosta is GM of the Baltimore Ravens, who Paper Waves will be seeing live and in person. Well, I guess maybe not Eric DaCosta. Oh, he'll probably be at the game. But he was chatting about a study done called the Loser's Curse. And essentially what that study was showing was that, or was arguing, was that nobody drafts better than anyone else. Mm-hmm. That everyone kind of drafts the same way. And essentially that you shouldn't be trading up for players. You should instead be looking to trade down for players, or just stick kind of where you are. But if you trade down, you get more assets to take more bites of the apple and draft more guys, and hopefully one of those guys will work out. It's a fascinating study. I think it's a mathematical thing that over time works out. And I think that as a full principle, I like the idea. I also, and the Ravens have done it before as well, I will also say that sometimes it's in your best interest to move up, because for some reason, a guy inexplicably is falling, and it's your opportunity to cash in on that, like the Ravens did in 2018 when they traded up to 32 and drafted Lamar Jackson, right? So, it's not a blanket statement for everything. I do think that, and the Patriots, by the way, did this for years. They were drafting at the end of the first round, and they just said, we'll just trade back 10 picks, 12 picks, and pick up a bunch of assets and go from there, And it's a good way to turn those players, that one player, into multiple players. And again, when you have more shots at it, I mean, the most famous one for me, the one that I think of right away, is the Cordell Patterson pick. They had the 29th overall pick. Mm-hmm. They traded that pick for a second, a third, a fourth, and a seventh. And with the second round pick, they drafted Jamie Collins. With the third round pick, they drafted Logan Ryan. The fourth round pick, they drafted Josh Boyce. And the seventh round pick, they traded to Tampa for LeGarrette Blount. And it's like, yeah, that one worked out pretty good. Obviously, Josh Boyce stunk, but like the other two, and then LeGarrette Blount, like that one worked out okay for the Patriots, And so it's like, to be able to pick up multiple players with multiple assets, it's better than taking a guy at 29.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, the balance of the draft, you have to find a balance between having confidence in the work that your staff has done over months or years on a draft class to figure out who the best prospects are, with not being so overconfident in the evaluations of your staff that you begin to act irrationally and begin to lock into certain positions or players. I feel like knowing where the tier breaks are in a draft is really big. If we're picking at one point in the draft and there's 3 different players at a certain position that we like, okay, we think we can move back 5 spots, 8 spots, 10 spots, still get one of those 3 and get an additional pick somewhere else. It's just being smart with it, because your scouts might really like one of those 3 better, but if they're still saying, they're all in the same tier, don't be too overconfident in, your own evaluations there. And then the other part of it, like, you can't be against trading up, because Bill Belichick has did that very effectively. Mm-hmm. Chandler Jones and Dante Hightower, 2012. Moving up to get those guys.
Both of those guys, yep.
Yeah, and it's, you still do have to have confidence in your evaluations. Um, I think, to me, the best part of the Patriots draft this year was the way they worked the board overall, trading back and then trading back up when they felt like they could get a guy. And that's why, we talked about grading this draft. There were a lot of moves the Patriots made that I didn't necessarily love, but then I also think you look at the draft class as a whole, and they got 5 players who I think were rated as top 100 prospects in this class. That's fantastic.
Yep.
And yeah, odds are 1 or 2 of those guys are probably going to be busts or just not pan out the way you want them to. But the fact that you get 5 chances at it means that, all right, well, one of these guys should at least be a quality starter, if not better. Probably 2 or 3 of them should be.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I thought they worked the board really well, and they still got assets for the future. I feel like every time you go into a draft, you should hope to come out with a pick for the next year's draft, because that just continues to give you flexibility. And there'll always be outliers. That's part of it too, is identifying when, hey, the next year's class we don't want to draft, we don't want to trade into, things like that. But yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. You look at what the Falcons did, right? So I would say at the end of the first round, and this is kind of where we chat about it, at the end of the first round, the Giants trade back up to get Jackson Dart. They trade 425, they trade 34, 99, and a third round pick next year for 25. Now, 34 ends up being Jaden Higgins, 99 ends up being Charles Grant, and then we'll see what the third round pick ends up being. That's a quarterback. I think if you feel like that guy is a good player, I'm cool with that. The Falcons, and people always mentioned the Falcons move up to 26. To move up to 26, they move up 20 spots from the second round. Mm-hmm. Now, they traded 46. They traded a 242, which is their 7th round pick this year, and they traded their 1st round pick next year for 26 and 101. Now, 26 and 101, I would say on the value chart, on the specific draft value chart, I think that trade's probably not terrible. I think if you look at the draft value chart, that's not a terrible trade. And part of the reason why is because you look at, you treat next year's 1st round pick as the last pick of the 1st round. The problem is that the Falcons are fine, but they're not that good. And so if you're sending a top 20 pick next year to them, now all of a sudden it becomes a little bit less good, a little bit worse, right? And so those are kind of those things where you have to wonder, like, man, you're mortgaging an awful lot to go get another pass rusher when you've already drafted a pass rusher. And again, maybe you love him. Maybe you love James Pierce. Maybe you think James Pierce, without his off-field extracurricular activities, would have been a lot higher on the board. He would have been a top 15 pick or whatever the case may be. And maybe you felt like you couldn't pass up that opportunity to take him. But I worry about trading future 1st-round picks. I really worry about it. Jacksonville did it to get Travis Hunter. Now, it's a little bit of a different situation because you're getting Travis Hunter. But I also thought for the Browns, it wasn't an awful trade by the Browns. It wasn't. You get number 5, you get number 36, you get number 126, and you get a 1st-round pick next year for 2, 104, and 200. And to me, you're saying, I'm going to see what happens next year. And if Jacksonville's bad again, now we're talking about another top 10 pick. And we're going to stink. So we're going to have 2 top 10 picks next year? Like, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? And so you're saying, all right, we're thinking about building towards the future. And those are the situations. But again, I think to your point, I thought the Patriots did a great job moving around the board, right? I think they were in front of runs. They traded back twice to get Jared Wilson. And again, we can argue about whether they would have taken Wyatt Millam at 85 or whether they would have taken someone, in between that 77 and 85. But I'm happy with the guy that we ended up with at 95, and then they moved up to take Joshua Farmer, just a few spots, but they moved up to take Joshua Farmer. And the other part of it is that when you look at what they gave up to get Joshua Farmer, now they moved up from 144 to 137, and They traded 144 and 238 for 137. They gave up basically nothing to move up those 7 spots.
I'm pretty sure that like every single trade the Patriots made during the draft was either a net zero value or positive value for the team based on the Rich Hill value chart.
Yeah, which is great.
Who is
That's what
on
we
this
wanna see.
podcast network, and you should go listen to him.
That's right. That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, so like you're working it well. The Pierce trade for me, I feel like knowing your tier breaks, this is where it's important. James Pierce was seen as, a late first rounder. He was the 26th ranked prospect by consensus. Donovan Azaraku from Boston College was 32nd. Also a late first rounder. He's only 6 spots lower on the board. He ended up going at, what pick was it? He ended up going at pick 44. Falcons could have, where did the Falcons even pick?
46. They were originally at 46.
Yeah.
And they moved up 20 spots. So they could have moved up 3.
Yeah, they could have moved up 3 spots and gotten an edge rusher seen as a late first round pick, and instead they moved up 20 to get an edge rusher viewed as a late first round pick.
Yeah.
That is extreme confidence in your staff's ability to discern a difference between those 2 prospects.
Right.
If you're right, that can really pay off for you. If you are wrong, and you're wrong here more often than you're right, you're getting a player who's not worth a pick, and you don't have the resources in the future to correct it. And like the Falcons have put themselves in a spot here where I feel like they actually have a decent team with the 2 issues, quarterback and edge rusher. And they've sunk a ton of resources into those 2 positions. And I am still not that confident they're actually going to be good at either one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you unfortunately end up. And that's kind of the point of this study, is that you trick yourself into believing that you're right. And maybe you're right. But if you spend too much assets, if you spend too many assets, and you spend too much money and too much draft capital to chase what you think is right, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be right. And now you've given up a bunch of extra draft capital to feel good about the picks that you've made, instead of picking up extra draft capital and thinking, all right, I like this guy pretty well. Well, I like him pretty good. Yeah, we'll draft him instead, right? And then we'll get more shots at it. And again, that's not always better. It's not always better, right? In Felger and Maz, we'll talk about all the time about how they want horses and not ponies, right? But like, fine, that's true. The problem is you don't know if you're getting a horse when you're drafting a guy there. And so that's really the issue. And it's the variability. And it doesn't matter where you're drafting the guy, whether you're drafting him 1 through 5 or 6 through 10 or 11 through 15 or 16 through 20 or, 21 through the rest of the draft. You just don't know, right? And you have a better shot of the guy being good if you draft him in the first round, because typically first round picks do better than other guys. But that's not a guarantee. And, there's a multitude of reasons why a guy won't work out. And those are things that you just can't predict at the time, and to give too much up to do that is a risky game.
You're increasing, your risks. And like other options here, Nick Scorton ends up going to the Panthers at pick 51. Falcons wouldn't have needed to trade up. They could have taken him. And now, that's a situation where you look in that division. If James Pierce ends up being the same player as Nick Scorton in productivity, well, the Panthers are in a better position right now to succeed, at least on that one thing. And then the one other player, which always tough because it's an off field, but Mike Green was rated, 10 spots higher, 9 spots higher on the board than James Pierce was. And he ends up falling all the way to the bottom of the second round, which again, off field issues, he's probably off their board. But just something you have to consider there about the quality of the player that you're getting. If you trade up for a guy who is not considered the best player on the board at that position there, by at least people who are watching the film, the football only, again, you are opening yourself up to more risks. And then I will, different spot. But I'll contrast this to something the Patriots did. Trevion Henderson at pick 38. Obviously, we know this isn't my favorite pick. That has been established on this show.
Yeah.
But what we can talk about is this. Trevion Henderson was like the 40th ranked player on the board. Quinshon Judkins was 50. Caleb Johnson was 54. So, like, that was the tier. That was, we talked about this, we broke down running backs. There was kind of a clear top 5 of running backs in this draft. And after that, there's a drop-off. It's a 20, 25 spot drop-off on the boards before you're getting to more guys. A very clear tier break. The Patriots clearly looked at that and said, okay, if we move back, we're probably going to get a running back who is a significantly worse one. So we're okay taking one here. I do think if you like him that much and you really feel like this team needs a running back, that is absolutely reading the board correctly, because there is a real gap in talent available between where you're picking in the second round and where you might be picking later.
Yeah, and it's totally true. And sometimes you have to do that, right? And sometimes you look at it and say, okay, we could make this trade, but if we make this trade, we're moving back far enough that we're not going to get this guy. And not even that we're not going to get this guy, but we're going to miss out on this entire tier of players.
Yeah, because if you move back, you're missing out on Henderson because he's going the next pick to the Bears. Like,
correct.
That is
correct.
Yeah.
That was happening. You knew that was going to happen, and so you say, okay, fine, he's gone. All right. Well, do we like Judkins as much? Probably not. But Judkins is already gone because he went 36, so he's out.
Yeah.
And so now you're looking at it saying, all right, well, who else is in that tier? All right, well, if we move back 15 picks, are we confident we're going to get one of those guys in that tier? And maybe you have Henderson in as the top guy in that tier, right? And so you feel best about him. But if you feel like the trade that's on the board, you don't feel confident you're going to get any of those guys in that tier, well, now you're looking at it saying, well, that's not a trade I'm willing to make, because we're going to lose out on all of these guys, not just the one guy that we're concerned about, but all of these guys. Yeah. And that, and then that becomes, okay, well, we got to live with that decision and hope we made the right one. But ultimately, you have to trust your board, and you have to trust, how you feel about that, and kind of see what goes on. And sometimes, by the way, trading up is the right thing to do. Right. And sometimes we have to do, and we talked about that, and sometimes you give up the assets to do it. Right. Sometimes you make that big trade. But the thing is that take a look at the times that teams have given up a ton to move up. How often has that worked out? Not very often. You look at the Panthers gave up a ton to move up for Bryce Young, didn't work out. The Niners gave up a ton to move up for Trey Lance, didn't work out. Right? Like, you see all of these times that who was it? Was it Goff? They traded 1 million picks to move up for Jared Goff.
I thought they had. Oh, yeah, I think they did.
Right, and then didn't they trade a picks to move up? No, they didn't get RG3 in the trade.
We're going too far back.
We're going too far back. But there was a trade where it was like number 1 and number 2 were both quarterbacks, and they both.
That was
Carson Wentz. Wasn't it Carson Wentz?
Yeah, Goff was 1, Wentz was 2, and I think both of those were trades up.
And
I will say,
yeah,
Wentz does help the Eagles get a Super Bowl, and I think Goff has lived up to the draft billing. It just took. Yeah,
but
I would argue that these trades are actually more successful with quarterbacks, because like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are also in the made a significant trade up to go get them.
Yes, fair point.
I don't necessarily mind the trading up for a quarterback, because I do think the league is good at evaluating who's a bad quarterback. Like, once you get out of the first round, you very rarely see quarterbacks end up being good. It almost never happens. It's like once every 5 years you get someone who is a baseline competent starter. So the fact that we know the league's good at telling you who's bad at this means it's worth moving up to have an actual chance at getting someone who's good, even if it totally falls apart like it did for some of those.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is, like, the Dolphins, for instance, just as an example.
Yeah.
The Dolphins trade with the Niners in 2020, and they trade with the Niners to go back to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wanted was an earlier first round pick. So they moved that pick to the Eagles to move up to 6
to get Jalen Waddle.
And of course, the Jalen Waddle pick is a good pick, right? That winds up being a good pick. The problem is they traded a 2012. They traded number 12, which ends up being Micah Parsons. and they traded a first-round pick in 2022. Now, that ends up being Kenyon Green, but if you look at the first round of 2022 and you go to let's just say pick 15, because that's where they were, right? Now, that wasn't a very good draft. And so maybe you don't feel terrible with that. But Trent McDuffie goes 21. Sure would have been nice to have that guy, right? Tyler Linderbaum goes 25.
With how bad their offensive line has been.
Tyler Smith goes 24, right? Like, there are guys there,
Yeah.
So anyways, Cole Strange goes 29. So, like, he could help their offensive line. But no, he wouldn't have. But the point,
he'd be better than some of the guys they've put out there.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, the point is, right, is that that trade ended up working out okay for the Dolphins. But, like, I don't know, would you rather have Micah Parsons or Jalen Waddle? Like, I'd rather have Micah Parsons. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things where it's like, and then you also gave up a first round pick as well.
Yeah. Well, then the other part with the Dolphins was they then took the extra first that they'd gotten, I think, as part of that, and like traded for like Jalen Ramsey and made some splash moves for veterans to kind of go all in.
Right.
But the bones, that the foundation of the team was not good enough to support a team that was going all in. And, quarterbacks often injured, and I wouldn't say mediocre. He's productive, but unable to be a high level player when asked to ad lib. And your offensive line is not that good. So when you play good teams, your quarterback's going to have to ad lib a lot. Well, that's a pretty good combination for winning regular season games and then losing playoff games right there.
That's correct. That is correct. Yeah. And Paper Waves points it out too. And you're right. Ultimately, the moves that have worked out have been the quarterbacks. If you're moving up to draft a quarterback and you hit on the quarterback, nothing else matters. If you hit on the quarterback, that's more important than any other position. If you're moving up for any other position, giving up that extra first round pick is just it's hard to do. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, that Pierce trade, like, that's based on the trade calculators. That's not a good trade. You're overpaying big time for that one. So, like, I don't know what the Falcons were thinking there, man. And last year, like, it's the quarterback stuff too. Like, I was never the biggest fan of Penix. I didn't think he was first round talent. Would have been okay taking him, back half of the first. But I just had so many accuracy and injury concerns with him that I was really questioning that. And we'll see what he ends up being this year. But they've thrown so many resources at these two important positions, and I'm not opposed to the idea of saying, hey, being able to have a good passer and being able to affect the other team's passer are the two most important things in the sport, so we're going to invest there. They just did it recklessly. I think they got too overconfident in their own, evaluations of what their needs were and the types of players that could fix them. And maybe they come out this year and Penix is good and Pierce is good and Joan Walker's good. And if that's the case, they could win the NFC. But
right.
It's probably just as good of odds that none of those three guys are impact players this year in a positive way. And if that happens, well, you're a middle-of-the-road team without the assets to make adjustments going forward. There was like that's one of the other things that the Patriots and the Ravens and the Eagles have always done well. When you give yourself more draft picks and play that way, you have so many more chances to fill holes on your roster and so many more opportunities to stay versatile as a result. You can then turn around and trade those draft picks when we're talking about moving up in the draft, or go get veterans. If it's the trade deadline and you're a good team and you need to add one piece, well, now you got some extra draft picks laying around that you can use to go make that move, which has worked for these teams. Or like Jordan Mailata was a 7th round pick.
I think was he a free agent? Maybe you're right. He might have been a 2nd round pick. I mean, a 7th round pick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think he was 7th, and just a guy that they, extra draft pick, will throw it at him and try to turn him into something. And most of the time that doesn't work, but sometimes it does. Julian Edelman, another example of that. We know he's an athlete. We know he can play football. Not really sure exactly what that does. Well, 5 years later, he's catching a Super Bowl winning touchdown for you.
Yep. Yep.
So you never know when that's going to happen. And the more lottery tickets you have, the better your odds are of stumbling into something. Or like even, going back to the top of this podcast, talking about Wes Schweitzer and the issues the Patriots had at left guard. If you have extra picks laying around, all right, it's the 7th round. We'll just throw a pick at guard. What happens if that guy turns into someone who is even just a Band-Aid level player? That's the type of thing that you can then say, okay, well, we can fix this position for 2 years because we got a, C+ at it, and now we can go use assets somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. That's what they did with Mike Almana.
Yeah,
6th-round pick.
So retaining flexibility is the name of the game. Also, because you never know when a receiver like AJ Brown is going to become available, and if your roster is good and has depth, you don't feel so bad about trading 1st-round picks for someone like that.
Exactly. By the way, just based on the draft trade chart, so do a little math here. The Falcons overpaid by 56 points on the Rich Hill draft chart, which is equivalent to pick number 80.
It's like a
pick 80 in the 3rd round, like a mid-3rd round pick. So that's just rough. That's hard. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of capital to overpay by.
Losing a top 100 pick to get an edge rusher who most scouts agreed was roughly as good as a player they could have gotten by trading up 3 spots in the 2nd round.
Which is rough. Or not trading up at all. And
if Mike Green was someone they were willing to take, yeah. So it's really that whole thing between the Falcons and Bill Belichick. Looking back, like, I can't tell who was in the right there, because every move the Falcons have made since then has said, man, you should have someone better in charge of football ops. And everything Bill Belichick has done since then made me say, I don't know if he's that guy.
Correct. Yes, correct. I agree. So, I can't imagine. Cannot imagine that anyone is upset that they passed on Bill Belichick at this point. Just based on what has transpired in the last however many months. It's been really weird.
I will say we don't have to do a whole Jordan Hudson thing on this podcast, but I do think we should at least mention that New York Times piece that came out earlier this week. Because it's a New York Times piece, not the Athletic piece, that talks about the Jordan Hudson Bill Belichick situation. Kind of. This has gone past the football world. This is now a news story, which is crazy. And it did mention in there that Jordan Hudson was staying at the team hotel with Belichick at times during the 2023 season. I can't comment too much on this because I don't know what the rules are for this type of thing for players and for coaches. I don't really know who knew. I don't know if Bill has done this before with other people. So, I'm not going to comment on it, but I will say that when your team is not doing well, you never want to introduce more distractions.
That's correct.
And I would be curious who on the team knew, if they knew when and what the reactions were. And then I think more importantly, when did Robert Kraft know and how did he take it?
Yeah, it's rough.
Because if your team won 4 games and your 70-year-old head coach is sneaking in a 20-something-year-old into the team hotel,
it's not ideal. It's really not ideal, especially if a player had been doing that, everyone would have lost their minds.
I would assume, and maybe, and we don't know what they're up to these days with team rules about this stuff. I assume that stuff's not allowed, but maybe they don't care. Maybe as long as everyone's at the team hotel and in by curfew, it's not an issue.
Right.
But I feel like it's pretty typical that family's not allowed. I think it's players and coaches only. So I would assume that this type of thing is not typical.
No, I don't think so. And it's just it rubs people the wrong way. I think, it was similar when he wrote that letter to Trump. The McCourties, I remember the McCourties coming out afterwards, or Devin McCourty coming out afterwards and saying he tells us to not say anything about anything. And then he turns around and does that. Support who you want to support, whatever. But you tell us to focus on football and don't get involved in stuff that don't belong on the football field. Don't get your name in the press that, if it's not football related, and then you go and do that. What are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like the rules don't apply to you, but they apply to us. Like that's just a bad way to run your team, right? And I think that, since she's been involved, and of course that was before she was involved, but since she's been involved, there's been a lot of situations where you just feel like if this were a player doing this, how would people feel about that? And if that's the case, you just like, you don't feel good about it.
Well, and the whole Bill Belichick mantra is no one is bigger than the team. I was just watching the Chad Ochocinco clip, or Chad Johnson. I think he changed his name.
It's Johnson now. Yeah.
Yeah. When he came to New England in 2011. And he talked about how in his first meeting, Bill was ripping Brady. And that was after they lost to the Jets in the divisional round at home. Brady deserved to be ripped after that game. And I think, who's the old safety from the Broncos? John Lynch, who was in New England briefly. I think he was here for camp in 2008. And Belichick started camp the same way, talking about Brady in 2007. He's like, this guy threw 50 touchdowns last year, and this is how we're starting things off. The Patriot way was like, I really feel like the core of it was the fact that you had the best player in football and a coach who could criticize him at any point and still get respect in the locker room, creating accountability for every single person in the room. Well, if the coach is no longer following his own rules about accountability, that's tough. And I will say, at no point in this did we hear that Bill was losing the locker room. So I'm going to guess the players didn't know and didn't care. But I think you look back at the pattern of some of Bill's decisions, like you look at the Dynasty documentary and what it talks about, it seems like kind of stemming from the Brady Belichick friction around the Alex Guerrero stuff and the Jimmy Garoppolo stuff and all that. Kind of seems like where all this started. Yeah. There definitely seemed to have been a pattern of Bill making decisions that were more based in ego than ones that he had made previously.
Yeah.
Football decisions and non-football decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, all right. That's enough. It's enough Belichick and Jordan discussion. But
yeah, she's also weird as hell, man.
Yeah. I'm not even going there. So, but you're not wrong, but I'm not even going there. So anyways, all right, that's it. That does it for our show tonight. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate you. We're gonna be back next week, and we'll be starting that series pretty soon with our 21 straight games, 21 years of our 21 straight games. Pretty excited about it. So that will be something you can read on Pat's Pulpit as well, and listen to
articles too.
So we're gonna be writing articles as well. That's gonna be a lot of fun. And so thank you to the chat for pulling up. Paper Waves, appreciate you with the keeping the chat going, and everyone else that was in the chat as well. We appreciate you guys, and thank you for coming through. And we will talk to you. Oh, and don't forget, right? We already mentioned this. Sign up for CLNS, right? Get on there. Subscribe to the YouTube channels. Hit the like button. Get the notifications going. You get all these guys. We get. I think some of the best coverage. In Patriots media, and then that's not even mention the Celtics or the Red Sox or anyone else. So, nevertheless, go on, subscribe, do all those things. All right.
And if you're subscribing now, signing up for this stuff, then you're all set for the season. You don't have to worry. So then when the season comes, you're already set up. You don't have to think about anything. All our videos, all our content is going to be right there in your feed for you automatically. And
that's right.
You don't have to think.
Aren't you sick of listening to Felger Maz? Goodness sake, just listen to us instead. Yeah. So anyways, all right. Well, thanks everyone. We appreciate you guys, and be good to each other, and go Pats.